Story 1. Nothing is ever free, but in the United States, we allow a parasitic middleman to get between us and our healthcare providers. Health insurance is a scam, and there is a better way. Story 2. I live in the United Kingdom. It is not perfect by any means, but I will defend it. No one should be held to ransom or subjected to rationing by insurance companies. It is inhumane. Story 3. Free access to healthcare should be the fundamental standard for government approaches to public health. I am pleased that while I remain healthy, I am contributing to a system that makes healthcare available for those around me who need it, and that the system will be accessible to me when I need it, without enriching executives unnecessarily. Story 4. Every major country in the world has some form of healthcare except the United States. It is important to note that the United States government spends the most per capita on healthcare by a significant margin. It is easy to conclude that if the United States implemented what every other country does, its citizens would be healthier and save money. However, the private healthcare and health insurance lobbies are extremely wealthy and powerful, which is the root of the problem in America. Story 5. I think free healthcare would be amazing with no more stress over doctor bills. However, I wonder how they would fund it all. Story 6. It feels like a basic human right. No one should have to choose between receiving treatment and going broke. It is not perfect, but it is a step toward a more compassionate world. Story 7. Free isn't the right word. Government-funded is more accurate. Does it cover 100% of anything you might need top-notch care for? It would be a significant win if we all had at least basic care covered. Story 8. Too many people failed math in school. They think the increased taxes would mean less money in their pockets. What they do not understand is that when we pay thousands a year in premiums and thousands a year in meeting deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums, we will likely end up having more money in our pockets. Some people have deductibles of over $10,000 a year, and they are still paying hundreds a month in premiums for that. Do the math. Eliminate all of that money spent on deductibles, premiums, and out-of-pocket maximums, and suddenly it does not look so bad. Story 9. I am in the United States, and while I would love to see universal tax-funded healthcare, I have no confidence in our government to deliver. The United States spends $1.9 trillion annually on Medicare and Medicaid. Divided evenly among all citizens, that amounts to about $5,600 per capita. Most countries with universal healthcare pay about $6,000 per capita. The United States has the resources to provide universal healthcare right now. Our leaders just aren't doing it because it's more profitable for a select few. So, even if the United States passed a bill stating universal healthcare for all, I suspect it would result in nothing more than a new tax and no actual changes to coverage. Story 10. There is no free healthcare system for everyone. Healthcare is funded through taxes and privately, like in the United States. It would be unreasonable to compare United States healthcare to that of other developed nations and conclude that tax-funded healthcare is the wrong approach. Story 11. I always thought there should be a universal value-added tax that all citizens pay on sales, which would fund a basic level of healthcare supported by employers contributing a small percentage. In the worst-case scenario, this could be set at 0.5%. If individuals want additional private coverage, they can pay for that separately. Story 12. Nothing is free, but it is certainly cheaper without a profit motive being a dominant force. I am fine with my tax dollars going towards preventing people from dying of avoidable illnesses. With luck, I will never have to take out more than I contribute. Story 13. I live in Europe. Healthcare is not free. It is paid for by taxes and controlled by regulations. However, it is universal, accessible, and affordable. There are no complicated systems or insurance companies determining your care over your physician. I have private healthcare coverage through my employer but also use the public system occasionally. The process varies only slightly. Let me tell you how my last appointment went. I called customer service to make an appointment. The appointment was scheduled for 2 weeks in the future. I arrived at the clinic and signed in at an automated kiosk, confirmed my appointment, the floor, and the door I should go to. I was seen within 5 minutes of my appointment time. After my appointment, Any prescriptions I needed were entered into a computer and made available to every pharmacy in the country. I went to the pharmacy, provided my medical number, and had my prescription filled at heavily subsidized rates. For comparison, a medication I could only get in the United States at $150 per month was $3 per month here. That's it, no copays, no worries until my next appointment. I have no clue why America prefers its system. Story 14. The most basic human right that everyone should have is access to affordable treatment, yet we still see people dying due to high costs. Story 15. It's normal. I don't think there are many countries where it doesn't exist. It's not a controversy. It's a basic public service, like police and firefighters. Story 16. I don't like the term free healthcare because it gives the impression that people want something for nothing, which isn't the case. I support my tax dollars being reallocated from constant defense spending and unnecessary projects, and instead going towards initiatives that improve society, such as comprehensive healthcare coverage, education, and highway maintenance. Story 17. It would save a significant amount of money and improve our health. The United States ranks below Costa Rica, which is ranked 37th in healthcare, while we pay $10,000 a year per person compared to their $1,500 per person. Japan, with the highest-ranked healthcare system, pays $4,000 per person. What if we paid $5,000 less and improved our healthcare system? The profit motive often leads to delays and denials, resulting in people not using their insurance until it is too late. Private companies often act against the interests of individuals. This can only be effectively addressed as a government service. Story 18. It is not free, but I would prefer my taxes to increase slightly so that my insurance payments can be eliminated. Story 19. I had abdominal surgery that cost $30,000, but since I live in Canada, the only expense I had was for pain medication at the pharmacy, which was $8. I believe universal health care is essential and that everyone should have access to it. Story 20. I believe it should be a human right. Even if we are just discussing it in terms of the service provided, like the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, people should never have to choose between bankruptcy or suffering and dying. That is barbaric. Story 21. Canadians do not think it is free, but most are happy to pay taxes so that everyone can access healthcare. No part of our system is perfect. Wait times can be long, and it can be difficult to get a new doctor if you do not like the one you have. However, observing the issues in American healthcare certainly makes me appreciate what we have. Story 22. Cue my fellow citizens to reveal that it is funded by taxes, as if we were not all very aware. Story 23. The comfort of knowing my healthcare is paid for by my taxes and not my employer is reassuring. Transferring jobs is much easier as there are no lapses in coverage, no changing providers, and no fear of experiencing a medical event without coverage. Story 24. As a former military member and now a veteran with healthcare for life, I fully support it. You will never understand how much better people's mental health is when they know they can visit the doctor when needed without the fear of accumulating debt just to receive a flu shot or a prostate exam. Healthcare for everyone. Story 25. Like the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, we've had that since 1948, so I've always been accustomed to it. It is a good idea. Obviously, it needs more funding, as everything does, and you can have private healthcare, such as BUPA, if you prefer. Apart from the practical aspects, I consider it a moral imperative, especially if you view it through John Rawls' veil of ignorance. If you get cancer or break a leg, I would rather my taxes go toward looking after you than for you to be bankrupted, as the same thing could happen to me next week. It's called living in a society. Story 26. If our taxes can provide legal representation for individuals who cannot afford it, I don't understand why they cannot provide medical care for those who cannot afford it. Story 27. Nobody should go broke because they got sick, and nobody should die because they cannot afford to pay. We are the only developed country that does not offer universal health care to all its citizens, yet we still incur charges for Medicare. It is time to lower the minimum age to 0. Story 28. Absolutely, we need this in the United States along with unlimited sick leave. It only benefits companies since healthy workers tend to be more efficient. While not all cases are the same, I prefer workers who can visit a doctor when they are ill, recover, and return to work rather than those who do not seek medical attention, which can lead to spreading illness in the office and resulting in decreased productivity. In general, a country that does not provide free healthcare for its citizens is failing to fulfill one of the most basic responsibilities of government, caring for its citizens. Story 29. Free is insufficient. Healthcare should be reasonably accessible, quick, comprehensive, and incorporate the most up-to-date treatment methods. No country has solved that challenge yet. Story 30. I wish conservatives in my country, Sweden, would consider this discussion and the experiences shared by Americans regarding their perception of the United States healthcare system. It may help them understand the importance of universal healthcare and stop advocating for privatization. I don't know what is more insane, having a corrupt, profit-driven health insurance system that exploits people's need for healthcare, or initially having a universal healthcare system and then deciding it would be better to switch to a corrupt, profit-driven health insurance model. Corruption seems to be pervasive among those who promote such systems. Story 31. I am biased because I have cerebral palsy. I stopped breathing a few hours after birth. I am denied private insurance solely due to circumstances beyond my control. If Medicaid goes away, I am at risk of losing my life. I have no issue with higher taxes because it would cost less than insurance premiums. I also believe that the standard of care would be higher. Healthcare is a right, as is freedom from worry. Story 32. Universal healthcare should be a human right, just like universal education. However, it should not exist while there is profit to be made. It is unfair to disregard the poor, the sick, and children for the sake of personal gain. Everyone deserves access to basic health and education services. Story 33. A human right is something my country thankfully has. Is it perfect? No, but it is far better than the alternative. Story 34. I don't want free, I want affordable. For some people, that is free, but for most, just make it so a trip to the emergency room doesn't mean bankruptcy. Story 35. I support it as an underemployed healthcare professional who cannot afford health insurance and needs it. Story 36. It is a poor idea. Those who seek to exploit the system will overcrowd hospitals and take all the healthcare resources, leaving nothing for those who truly need it. Access to healthcare should be considered a human right and guaranteed by any developed nation. Anyone who believes otherwise is misguided. Story 37. I am from the same place as the man who created Britain's National Health Service, so I might be biased. I believe it is a fundamental human right and the hallmark of a just and caring society. Story 38. Works for me. I don't mind paying higher taxes to ensure we all have the same access and rights to health care. Story 39. I would prefer my tax dollars to support injured and sick individuals rather than fund multimillion-dollar bombs being dropped in places most people cannot identify on a map. Story 40. Absolutely. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. People should not be forced into bankruptcy or on the street instead of receiving cancer treatments. It is nonsensical that we lag behind the world in education and healthcare while claiming to be superior. The only area where we excel is our military. Story 41. It should not even be a question. We are already paying taxes, and that money could easily be used to fund healthcare. Story 42. It is frustrating how many comments point out that it is not free. We are aware of that. The question is whether it should be free out of pocket, which it should be. I already pay taxes, and I am tired of that money going to ineffective programs like the military and to representatives who do not care about us. Story 43. As a Canadian, I fully support it. However, it needs to be regulated, and much more should be done to promote healthy living proactively. Story 44. What else do we pay taxes for? It certainly isn't the quality of the roads. It certainly isn't security. They're dragging people out of their homes and tossing them in jails in a foreign country for having tattoos. Is it power? No. I receive a bill for electricity. Is it water? No, I get a bill for that too. Waste removal? No, there's a bill for that as well. The right to shop? No, we pay the retailers directly. So, just what are we paying these officials all this money for? What are they doing with it for us? Oh, building another building for which they charge people rent to use. So that's not it. Regulating trade? According to the news, we're not trading anymore. And if we were trading, doesn't the company providing the goods get the money? Why does the government even need a part of that? Regulation. I see, that's the point. Someone to ensure that the food we eat is healthy, yet we have an alarming number of growing recalls and health scares due to unsafe food. Someone to make sure we don't get taken advantage of when we buy something that isn't what we were told it was. Sort of like when we elected a president but instead got someone who has connections with no real experience, running around causing chaos. Okay, so someone to uphold our laws so we can have safe streets and sleep well at night, knowing we're being looked out for. Unless you're black or brown or poor. So, why are we paying taxes? Didn't we fight a war with England about this issue? Just a thought. We are the greatest country in the world, yet we're the only industrialized country that doesn't provide healthcare for its workforce. So, what exactly makes a country great? Money? A willingness to completely undermine its citizenry to make a profit? What? Story 45. Free at the point of service. It is inevitable in this systematically broken system. Our healthcare system currently is one of the diseases harming our country. Story 46. Having faced significant medical expenses beyond my control and still enduring high taxes, I believe we should reallocate funds from inefficient programs to universal healthcare. We treat healthcare as a luxury instead of a necessity, which it truly is. One never knows when they might be confronted with a terminal illness or other uncontrollable circumstances, and it is unjust to suffer financial ruin or bankruptcy as a result. Story 47. I prefer knowing that an accident or illness can bankrupt me, cause me to lose all my possessions, and ruin my life. Story 48. I pay $1,300 a month for Kaiser for my family and still have an $8,000 a year copay. It's absolute robbery, especially since I haven't been to a doctor in over 10 years. Story 49. Nobody in the world can convince me that people who oppose it aren't the most selfish individuals ever. I work in a pediatric hospital, and the number of times I've seen families distraught over the thought of making things work is heartbreaking. Monetizing and corporatizing health is genuinely one of humanity's most absurd evils. Story 50. It's amusing how others can achieve this while we cannot. To begin with, it isn't free. It is funded by your taxes, just like other services that benefit society. However, the increase in taxes will be nowhere near what we currently pay in premiums, out-of-network fees, co-pays, and deductibles. Additionally, healthcare costs decrease because people no longer ignore health issues until they end up in the emergency room. Story 51. I am American, and I want my taxes to help others and prevent suffering. I want my taxes to support our country in reaching new heights by ensuring our people are taken care of. I earn a decent income and have a stable career. I have excellent healthcare through my employer. I come from a long line of people who worked very hard to achieve stability for our family. Not everyone has the same opportunities, faces the same barriers, or enjoys the same privileges, and I recognize that. I also understand the concerns of those who fear that some may exploit a system designed to support people. We see it in memes often that 29 out of the 30 most developed countries have achieved free healthcare and education. These countries are not overrun by the fictional welfare queen stereotype that some criticize. Nations that have figured it out also maintain a decent gross domestic product and quality of life for their citizens. However, we are governed by those who prioritize capital and profit at all costs, completely detached from the true experience of being American, or even human. In my opinion, caring for others should be a top priority in politics. Story 52. Universal healthcare makes complete sense and will save countless lives while preventing financial ruin when someone gets sick. That being said, it will likely never happen in the United States. The media will continue to manipulate public perception, portraying universal healthcare as a negative concept and implying that it leads to social issues. Additionally, many Americans would prioritize their own benefits over the well-being of others, even if it means ignoring the struggles of their neighbors. Story 53. I think it's unjust that the United States does not provide it. Although I question the wording, The only individuals who believe it is free are those misrepresenting our position. Of course, it is not free. It is a shared burden that the entire society pays for the benefit of all. Story 54. I have been in the medical business sector for over 30 years. It would be much easier for all parties involved to have a single-payer system. Story 55. When I was a child, my parents told me how high the taxes were in Canada to support their free healthcare, and that if we did that, nobody would become a doctor. In my over 50 years, I have learned one thing. My parents are often wrong. Story 56. In the United States, we specialize in allowing intermediaries to exploit complex industries that are essential for survival: healthcare, education, and housing. As such, the cost to users of these vital services is often completely divorced from the cost to providers. You are paying a multitude of insurance companies, resellers, agents, administrators, lobbyists, and financiers to access these services, and they all want their share. Story 57. Well, I'm sitting here in the United States with a urinary tract infection, borrowing my dog's antibiotics, so you could say I am a fan. Story 58. People who are against it lack an understanding of how private insurance works. You essentially pay for insurance while also benefiting investors and executives rather than just covering the costs of insurance. Story 59. I believe all tax-paying citizens and their children should be supported based on the taxes we pay. We need a serious restructuring of how our tax dollars are spent. Education and healthcare are priorities and should be considered human rights, not afterthoughts. Story 60. There is no rational argument against it, unless you have been watching right-wing propaganda for decades. Imagine a modern society that provides care for the health of all its people. Imagine a society where, unless you have enough money, you cannot access medicine. That is where we currently stand. The only reason we do not have it is that wealthy individuals want even more wealth and do not want to help those who have little. This is the sole reason. The right-wing propaganda convinces enough voters to prevent Congress from addressing this issue. Story 61. After observing the excessive spending by the government, I do not want to hear a single excuse as to why the United States government cannot provide free healthcare to all citizens. Story 62. One of the main reasons why Canadians, like myself, do not want to join the United States as a state is universal healthcare. As flawed as our system is with wait times and the lack of access to general practitioners, we can still live with the inconvenience. If you need life-saving care, are planning on having a baby, or require elective surgery of any kind, you can do so without worrying about the financial burden. I'm currently recovering from knee replacement surgery as I write this, following a hip replacement 5 months ago. Looking ahead, I signed up for the other hip today. My cost? $0. If I lived in the United States, I would face significant financial challenges. I will miss work and take a hit, but I won't face bankruptcy because of it. Of course, I do have to pay for medication at an 80% discount through our extended health plan and for medical aids, which are tax-deductible at year-end, but at the end of the day, it won't leave me with massive debt. Story 63. Let's put this into perspective. Yes, the waiting times may be high due to underfunding, but I had knee surgery through the National Health Service with one of the best knee surgeons in the country. I am a working man, and I am confident that such care would not be available for someone like me in the United States. The National Health Service is a treasure, and we should treat it with the reverence it deserves. Story 64. I want my taxes to support health care, not the excessive spending on other issues. Taxes should be higher for the wealthiest individuals, not lower. Why do they receive so many tax breaks despite their strong financial status while people are dying who cannot afford to visit the emergency room? When uninsured individuals go to the emergency room, it increases costs for those who are insured. We are already covering medical care for people in dire situations. Why not incorporate this into the system? Story 65. This is a messaging problem. The term free is misleading and counterproductive. Everyone would need to contribute to this gift through taxation. When healthcare access is provided to all at a basic level, the overall health of the population will improve, leading to reduced costs of care and slower government spending on healthcare and end-of-life expenses. Story 66. It should be a right for every human on this planet. People have died because they cannot afford basic treatment, and I find that absolutely unacceptable. Story 67. Making healthcare very affordable is a good idea. Making it completely free is not. People tend to adopt a throwaway and devaluing attitude when something is entirely free. Even in single-payer universal healthcare nations like Taiwan, a small copayment is charged to discourage people from using it frivolously or needlessly. Story 68. I'm in support, but I wish we would stop calling it free. It will be funded by taxes, which is fine. We need to start calling it included healthcare or something else. Story 69. It would allow for millions of new jobs to be created. As one of the biggest challenges for new small businesses is the high cost and complexity of health insurance. This would create unprecedented economic growth that most of us have never witnessed since the 1990s dot-com era when I was just a child. Story 70. We should have it, and the only reason it is difficult to implement is the greed of insurance companies and for-profit hospitals, along with anyone else who benefits from the current situation. I believe too many people make excuses for why we can't proceed. They say we are too big or express concerns about job losses. While I understand the job aspect, using it as an excuse to avoid progress is unproductive. Instead of working to solve the problem, we often declare that it cannot be done and walk away. Politicians do this even when someone presents a viable solution. Story 71. The for-profit healthcare system in the United States is expensive and covers only 75% to 85% of the population. Even those who label government services as socialism have demonstrated that universal healthcare would provide coverage for everyone and cost less than the current system. Story 72. Universal healthcare should be available, but universal and free are not the same thing. Private health insurance should be an available option for those who want it, but basic needs such as emergency room visits, vaccinations, preventative care, major operations, mental health care, and prescriptions should be covered under a universally distributed plan. Since universal and free are often used synonymously, it is important to understand that funding must come from somewhere. Taxes and employer contributions are examples of how to finance these services without imposing excessive post-tax or out-of-pocket costs. However, this raises its own issues, including who pays those taxes, how much they pay, and who benefits relative to their contributions. This has been one of the greatest political battles between conservative and capitalist policies versus left-wing and social welfare programs. Story 73. Universal healthcare is significantly cheaper than private insurance-based healthcare, both for individuals and for national investment. Even if it were not the obvious moral imperative, it remains the clear rational choice. Story 74. I support public healthcare while also valuing the option for private healthcare. Additionally, I believe it should be free only for actual citizens and not for visitors. Story 75. I feel just fine. I pay taxes and complain about them. They might as well work for us all and provide me with healthcare that won't make me homeless. Story 76. It has been proven that universal healthcare would cost us less. Many people delay visiting the doctor for ailments because they worry about the costs. As a result, what was once an easily treatable condition can progress significantly. The individual then goes to the emergency room and undergoes numerous diagnostic tests, receives a diagnosis, and experiences a longer hospital stay due to the advanced stage of the disease. The cost at this point is substantially higher than it would have been if the person had received timely treatment. Universal health care would provide preventive care for everyone. Preventive care has been shown to reduce costs and save lives. No one should ever have to choose between their health and their financial well-being. Story 77. One conservative trope is that people do not want to pay for services through their taxes. What they fail to mention is that these same individuals will no longer have to pay exorbitant health insurance premiums and costs. Story 78. I am Canadian and fully support it. No one in Canada has to worry about the cost of a medical procedure. Story 79. Why would you not want universal health care? According to many studies, it is less expensive than private health care, has better outcomes, and does not tie you to debt or your job. You can just go, and it is so much better. Story 80. I am a Canadian and would never give up our healthcare system. If any of my family or I get sick or hurt, I simply go to the nearest hospital or walk-in clinic without a second thought. It is a strained system, especially with an aging population, but it works well. Hospital wait times can be quite long, but they tend to triage properly. Story 81. Canadian. It works. It's also not free. I see it deducted from every paycheck, and I am more than happy to see that. Sure, there could be some improvements, but the American system is problematic. Story 82. Take most of the profit out of your healthcare system, and you might be surprised at how relatively affordable it can be, even on a national scale. Best regards from Canada, where our system isn't perfect, but quite frankly, I would rather have what I have than what you currently have. Story 83. We would have had it in the United States if our government did not prioritize the interests of billionaires at every opportunity. Story 84. I would prefer to pay an extra 7% in taxes rather than the 15% of my income that goes towards insurance premiums. Additionally, it is commendable if this helps prevent someone from dying because their fundraising for insulin fell $50 short. Story 85. I believe those who hinder its realization are prioritizing profits over their fellow human beings and will face serious consequences. Story 86. Sane American here. Yes, please. Luckily, I am a healthy person and for the most part, only see medical professionals for routine examinations. Even with that, I am tired of all the insurance chaos. Story 87. Bankruptcies in America are usually caused by medical debt. The current administration is reducing funding for Medicaid. There will be many more bankruptcies in the future. I would love universal health care in America, but it is unlikely to happen due to the significant profits being made. Story 88. I fully support it because the opposite question requires me to determine who does not deserve to live the healthiest life possible, and that question is unfathomable for me to answer. Story 89. A basic free healthcare system, similar to what we have here in Spain, is a necessity anywhere in the world. I do not care if you earn more or less money. Providing everyone with the basic care and support they need is the top priority in any healthy society. Story 90. Charging money to help someone survive illness or injury is fundamentally wrong. If you cannot afford the exorbitant cost of healthcare in places like the United States, you are at a severe disadvantage. It's even worse if you are diagnosed with cancer. If you are not wealthy, you may face financial ruin due to medical expenses. Thousands of unnecessary deaths occur because people avoid seeking medical care out of fear they cannot afford it. Subsequently, they may die because they were not fortunate enough to be born into a wealthy family. Story 91. It should be a right, not an advantage for the wealthy. Now, those with fewer resources have significantly lower life expectancy, while the affluent enjoy a much higher quality of life. Story 92. Yes, the wealthy have access to healthcare and the extremely poor have healthcare, but if you earn just enough money to survive, you must pay a high price for everything. Throughout my life, I have foregone essential healthcare because I needed to pay rent and wanted to eat. Story 93. Wouldn't that be a dream for a huge part of the population? I am 35 and have so many medical bills from this year alone. Ambulance services, emergency room visits, specialists, medication. It is a mess. What good is insurance when the copays feel like you are paying the whole cost? We are only having one child because how could we afford another? If we didn't refinance during the pandemic, I am not sure we would be able to get through the month. I dare to dream. Story 94. Imagine believing someone should go bankrupt for needing surgery. Imagine believing you should only have health insurance if you have a job. Story 95. I would happily pay higher taxes for a decent single-payer healthcare system that eliminates the difficulties I face in getting coverage approved under my employer health plan, which is very expensive. Story 96. As the son of a mother who has declared bankruptcy multiple times due to medical debt and is about to do so again, I believe our taxes should be directed towards providing free healthcare. It is troubling that our taxes fund actions that harm children in other countries for reasons we do not support. Story 97. As a citizen of the United States, I support healthcare for everyone. I would be willing to accept longer wait times for appointments if it resulted in lower costs for individuals and the government. I believe the United States should adopt a system similar to Canada's, where private insurance exists but plays a different role, primarily covering expenses such as prescription drugs, dental care, vision care, private hospital rooms, and allied health services like physiotherapy and chiropractic care. Story 98. That should absolutely be the case for everyone. That is the one thing I am completely okay with my tax being spent on. Story 99. I fully support it. If I can contribute a little more to ensure everyone has access to healthcare and education, then I am happy to do so. Story 100. We already have it for anyone over 65. It's called Medicare. To all of you saying it won't work, doesn't work, or will take months for appointments, increase taxes, etc., it does work and has worked. It will continue to work as long as we stop politicians from trying to take from it or interfere with it. Story 101. From the United States, I lived in Southeast Asia for about a year. I support free healthcare and believe there should at least be an option for everyone, even if it is not ideal. There is no excuse for a government not to provide care for its citizens. Story 102. People always complain because taxes would increase, but in the end, it would actually be cheaper than paying for insurance through work. People just see the word tax and have a meltdown. Story 103. I used to be a conservative and believed that socialism was bad. However, as I've gotten older and more liberal, I now question why socialism is considered bad. If you only focus on communist countries, it may seem awful. Yet, many post-industrial countries have figured this out. Why are Americans so adamant about being highly individualistic on every issue? The truth is that the metric system is superior, universal healthcare isn't evil, and the rest of the world often mocks us for being so stubborn. If you're convinced that America is the best, everyone else is inferior, then you probably won't care. However, there are stable democracies in Europe where the cost of living is reasonable, healthcare is free, and the quality of life is high. We are so caught up in our own illusions that we are deceiving ourselves. We have real problems in America, but we can't even begin to solve them because we refuse to acknowledge their existence, thanks to the America is the best mentality, which cripples our ability to recognize our issues. The billionaires understand this. They constantly exploit our insecurities and we buy into it. We continue to enrich them while impoverishing ourselves in the process. If Americans are truly honest with themselves, things are not great. We are in decline because we cannot engage in the essential conversations we need because everything is overly partisan. With extreme partisan contrarianism being prevalent, we struggle to acknowledge when people on the other side make valid points. This is a problem on both the left and the right. The right may appear irrational and actively try to undermine our democracy, embracing fascism, but the left does this too. I've seen individuals on the left admit they disengage or take a hard line in response to the right because the right seems so absurd. But that does not improve the situation. It only worsens everything. Story 104. You do not have to pay for health insurance, but you may face higher taxes. I believe it seems like a fair trade-off. Story 105. I left the United States and moved to a country with universal healthcare. It isn't the reason I left, but it's the reason I won't go back. Story 106. I love our National Health Service. It isn't perfect, but it is a lot better than the alternative. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Story 107. There are certain essentials that should not be monetized without considering affordability for those who are underprivileged. Healthcare, medicine, food, water, and electricity, anything that can be a matter of life or death. By pricing life-saving drugs or doctor visits at $300 and more, we are valuing money above human life. No one should ever die because they cannot afford it. Story 108. Social healthcare is the moral obligation of every country. The strong should care for the weak. This is what has made us successful as a species. For 100,000 years ago, Neanderthals were caring for sick, injured, and senior members of their groups who could not fight or hunt for themselves. Why should we, who have more resources, power, and technology than humans have had at any point in our evolution, allow the sick, injured, and elderly to suffer and die because we prefer to have an extra car, a second home, or a larger investment portfolio? There is no argument anyone could make to justify the privatization of healthcare. None. Story 109. But you have to realize that our government is influenced by various entities. The excessive cost of medical care in the United States is driven by corruption and the practices of insurance companies and large pharmaceutical companies. They continue to profit while everyone else becomes sicker and poorer. Story 110 vital. Currently, the parasitic insurance companies stand in the way. I believe a certain Italian plumber showed us the way forward in removing this obstacle. Story 111. Having lived in Japan, it is truly remarkable. Many cases of cancer are detected early, resulting in numerous lives saved and fewer bankruptcies due to excessive medical bills. The American healthcare system is deeply flawed when profit is prioritized over people's lives. Story 112. It is long overdue for the United States. However, some individuals will continue to vote against their better interests. What I pay now could be redirected into free healthcare through taxes, and I would pay less than I do now. Unfortunately, many people do not understand this. I am not seeing a very bright future for our country, but I will not go down without a fight. Story 113. Let's do it. As far as I can tell, there is no downside to ensuring everyone has access to healthcare. Story 114. I like to look at it this way. Why should healthcare be segregated? What is the argument for limiting access to life-saving and quality-of-life care? If the argument is that people who offer a service deserve to be compensated, I agree, but there is no rule stating that individuals need to pay for it, which isn't self-imposed. If some say that others don't deserve care, why? What is the argument for limiting access? I have yet to hear one that does not point to elitism or prejudice. My default state is that everyone deserves to be healthy, because we are not cruel. But then I realize I live in a country that denies people this right because they cannot pay and lack education. Story 115. I live in Japan. Free healthcare is common sense. As a modern civilization, we should support our fellow humans. Story 116. Argentina is a country where two essential services are fully covered by the state: education and healthcare. While these services are far from perfect, as hospitals and universities have been deteriorating for at least 20 years, they have not been stripped away as basic rights, which I believe is commendable. One downside is that many foreigners access medical services here at no cost. Story 117. I am Canadian and was initially confused by your question. I am avoiding my doctor because she will scold me, as well as due to parking fees and long wait times. Story 118 should have been done by now, but that's the issue with socialism. It disregards the needs of the sick, elderly, and poor. Story 119. Australia has a Medicare levy of 2% of your taxable income. It funds basic care, including hospital services and limited dental coverage. Basic care includes treatments for cancer, heart conditions, and other major health issues, but does not cover cosmetic procedures. You can also purchase private insurance, which provides a higher level of care beyond basic services. Additionally, we have a pharmaceutical benefits program that caps prices on most common prescription medications. Story 120. I live in a country that values this. Even the most conservative person in our nation would fight fiercely to preserve it. Story 121. I don't understand why the United States does not have this. More than half the population would benefit beyond what they would have to pay out of pocket, and the economy would experience a boost as healthy workers remain productive. Costs per person would decrease as more issues could be addressed early before they become major problems. It seems like an obvious choice. However, this is not possible because conservative leaders have spent decades convincing many people that socialism is a threat. Conservative politicians primarily serve the upper class, and the upper class does not want to bear the costs. Story 122. All the government needs to do is pass a rule that limits the prices of all medical products and services. Then pass another law that requires all health insurance companies and healthcare providers to operate as non-profit entities. Story 123. We can more than afford it, yet we are being exploited at every level by private for-profit healthcare entities. Insurance, hospital fees, supplies, and medications often cost about 10 times what they do in other countries with more systematic plans. Ditching our current state of affairs and adopting a plan based on what other countries use is the only sensible move. We have the worst situation possible. There are really only 4 models of healthcare systems in use. The Beveridge model, government pays for healthcare funded by taxes, as seen in Great Britain, Spain, most of Scandinavia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, and Cuba. The Bismarck model, mandatory insurance that must cover all. This multi-payer model, found in Germany, includes about 240 different funds. However, tight regulation gives the government much of the cost control power found in the single-payer Beveridge model. This model is used in Germany, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Japan, Switzerland, and to a degree Latin America. The National Health Insurance model, a hybrid with private sector providers, where payment comes from a government-run insurance program that every citizen pays into, as seen in Canada, Taiwan, South Korea, and some newly industrialized countries. The out-of-pocket model, the wealthy receive medical care while the poor remain sick or die, as seen in rural regions of Africa, India, China, and South America. The United States incorporates elements of all these models, depending on individual circumstances, but lacks an overarching system, which is why it is such a significant disaster. When it comes to treating veterans, we resemble Britain or Cuba. For Americans over the age of 65 on Medicare, we resemble Canada. For working Americans who receive insurance through their jobs, we resemble Germany. For the 15% of the population who lack health insurance, the United States mirrors Cambodia, Burkina Faso, or rural India. Story 124. I am in Canada, and while it may be considered free since it is funded through taxes, the wait times and quality of care are unacceptable, leading to people dying while waiting to see a doctor. Story 125. It's not free healthcare. It's healthcare paid for through normal taxation. Everyone pays a little more in tax, which is less than insurance. However, as with everything else funded through taxation, the wealthy effectively pay more than the less fortunate for receiving the same service. As they should. It's a way of giving back to the society that allowed them to succeed. Story 126. It's not free, and I challenge anyone who says it is. Your tax dollars are used to pay for your health care in a democratic, humane way. The doctors do not go hungry, and they are free to focus on what is best for you, rather than what their hospital needs for the fourth quarter or dealing with insurance companies that are trying to extract the most value from you as an asset. Considering the United States tax dollars are mostly spent on acquiring new equipment for the Department of Defense and funding mass violence against groups of people deemed socially acceptable this month, I am absolutely willing to allocate resources to stop paying excessively for the inadequate system we currently have. If you support the state paying for potholes and road work, why are you not okay with your federal government paying for gunshot wounds and kidney dialysis? The opposition from people who aren't directly profiting from this issue will never make sense to me. Story 127. I used to be against universal health care, but at this rate, there's no way you would pay more in taxes than you currently do with premiums, deductibles, your responsibility, usually 20%, and copays. I would much rather pay a lower tax and not have to worry about how much it will cost to have an emergency. Story 128. Australia has a balanced approach to healthcare. We have Medicare, which is funded through a levy, but private health insurance is also available. Public healthcare may take longer, while private healthcare can be costly but offers quicker access. Overall, a fundamental role of the government is to provide healthcare. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.